Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Welcome to a special edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, our procrastination special men's basketball preview, as the Knights are already have one game in the books, but it's been so busy around here that we wanted to get this out here, and we've got a lot going on. So I am Jeff Sharon, along with Eric Lopez. What's up, Elo?
Not much. Basketball season's here. I'm ready.
Can you believe it, man? This year has gone by way too quickly. Here we are in November. Thanksgiving,
Football's coming to an end. Basketball starting. It's crazy.
Well, so we got a special edition here. It's going to be our little basketball preview. We got a couple interviews that we wanted to bring out for you here. I've got B.J. Taylor, who's back this year. Talked to him during Media Day. We'll give you a little bit of that conversation that I had with him. And then our special guest for this special program is the one, the only, Mike O'Donnell, former UCF point guard, has developed a very nice broadcasting career of his own. Of course, he worked in administration at UCF for a little while. And one of the most beloved UCF players and really figures in program history. So we'll have Mike on today to talk about UCF basketball. So first, let's just set the scene for what's going on with UCF in its first year under head coach Johnny Dawkins, former two-time player of the year at Duke, longtime NBA player with the Spurs and the 76ers, among others. Went back to Duke to coach under Coach K, is now, and then actually held the job at Stanford most recently for a while. Stanford let him go, but he came back here to UCF under Danny White. There's the Duke connection for you. And the Knights already 1-0 in the season, 80-56 win on Monday over Nicholls State, led by Matt Williams, who was hot from three-point range at 6 threes, had 20 points. Taco Fall was 16 and 16. B.J. Taylor was back there. A little bit of a taste of what we hope we will see from UCF in the home opener. Eric, what were your impressions from this team as they start this new era under Johnny Dawkins?
Well, you didn't know what to expect, right? Johnny Dawkins, new coach, rosters questions, depth questions, and it was good to see BJ back out there. I think we've forgotten how good BJ Taylor was his freshman year.
And he was a freshman too, he was so good, and you could tell how raw he was back then.
Right, and he missed all of last year, which probably derailed that season last year, in all honesty, because UCF really doesn't have an answer at point guard for a B.J. Taylor. They didn't have it last year. I don't think they have it this year either. So, that was good to see, and it was good to see Taco really be involved and being very nimble and not so robotic and very optimistic. Because to me, one of the big things about this season is the individual developments of a B.J. Taylor and a Taco Fall, and because let's be honest, this team has got some hills that they're going to have to climb, and they got some deficiencies with the lack of the depth on the roster, with a variety of reasons, and there's a lot of guys sitting out for next year. So I think if you can get those marquee improvements from a B.J. Taylor and a Taco Fall and those guys going into next year, then I think now the expectations can be realistic. I think this year it's more of a learning curve and learning Coach Dawkins and learning the style and seeing what these guys can do here. And that's going to be interesting to me as the season unfolds.
Yeah, a couple of the guys that are not back this year, obviously. Adonis Enriquez, who was last year's second leading scorer on the team, is gone. Justin McBride is gone. He's at Valdosta State. Shaheed Davis obviously graduated. Stephon Blair also graduated. But those are some key people in the lineup that the Knights now no longer have at their disposal. A lot of youth now on the lineup or out there for UCF, and guys trying to figure out their way in the roster. But, I thought that the starting five, once A.J. Davis gets healthy, you're looking at a starting five right now of Tank Effiani, B.J. Taylor, Taco Fall, A.J. Davis, and Matt Williams. Nick Banyard actually looked really good in that game against Nicholls State, coming off the bench. He's a redshirt senior, one of these guys who's transferred over from some major programs. He came over from Illinois State, kid from Texas, and he's a redshirt senior. So he got some run in that game, looked really good. You got some other names out there from some places who've come over with Johnny Dawkins. Dayon Griffin, a junior from St. Pete, who came over from Louisiana Tech. Roca Silvitas, who's a 6'11 guy from Texas Tech who came over. Aubrey Dawkins, who is Johnny Dawkins' son, came over from Michigan. He's a junior. And then on top of some other fellows who came over as well, Nathan Lang, who came over from Jacksonville State. So a lot of transfers coming over in addition to the youth movement. So there's a lot of guys here who are going to be kind of finding their way here at UCF. But, Eric, you mentioned B.J. Taylor, the redshirt sophomore who's now basically in his third year at UCF, but missed all of last year, redshirted because of the injuries that he suffered. Boone High School graduate. I caught up with him on Media Day, Eric, and he looked like Mr. Universe out there. He's been hitting the weight room hard, and here's a snippet of that conversation that I had with BJ.
First of all, how are you feeling after last year with your injury and all that?
I feel good. It's been a long time coming. It's been a long process having to sit out for so long, but around May is when my ankle got 100% healthy, so think about it, it was all the way from October until May. It took for me to get completely healthy, but now I feel great. My body's in great shape.
I can tell.
Yeah.
You look like you put on some muscle, man.
Yeah, my body's in great shape. I'm as lean as I've ever been, and I'm jumping over 40 inches in the vertical, running as fast as I possibly can, and running fast as I've ever ran, let me say that. But it's been great, and my game is in a great place. I feel good about my skills and putting a lot of off-season work this off-season, so I'm just excited to get it rolling.
What's the biggest change in your game from, when you came in as a freshman, they kind of handed you the ball and be like, okay, go play.
Yeah.
And when you're coming in as a true freshman, I can't imagine what that transition must be. You get the year off. Do you think that despite dealing with the injury, that it helped you?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's depending on how you take it. If you're somebody who has pity on themselves and just weeps and feels sad and doesn't take advantage of the time off and want people to feel bad for you, then you won't grow in a situation like that. But from the day that I knew I wasn't going to play last season, I tried every day to do something to improve, whether it was watching more film on top players in the NBA, Damian Lillard, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, Steph Curry's, small things that they do, and just improving my body over the offseason. I think I grew so much during that time. So I think the biggest thing that I've probably grown in, even more than just on the floor, my abilities, which have grown, but probably just been maturity, just learning so much over this time and growing as a player and growing as a person, that I think my maturity will show this season, and spreading the knowledge I have to the guys on this team.
Last question for you. Now you're in your first year under Coach Dawkins, who was a scoring point guard and was the National Player of the Year when he was not far from your age. Twice. And what, in the short time that you've been with him so far, what new things have you learned from him in terms of your craft and playing point?
I think I've learned that you have to be yourself more than anything. You can't try to be somebody else. Like, I can't try to be Russell Westbrook. I can't try to be Chris Paul. Like, you got to be who you are as a player, but you have to learn to use your aggressiveness and harness it and help the team grow as well. And everybody knows that I'm a good scorer, I'm a talented scorer, and I'm a scorer for the team, but also I'm a guy who can set other players up. I'm a guy who can be aggressive and not only use my aggressiveness for myself, but help set the other players up. And the other biggest thing I've learned is that no matter what's going on in the game, you have to keep competing and come to compete at a high level every night and just play to win. And those are probably the biggest things I've learned from him. And also never let your highs get you high, your lows get you low. If you're shooting 0 for 10, shoot the next one like you're 10 for 10. If you're shooting 10 for 10, you need to keep the same focus and play with the same mindset and discipline as you did early on in the game. So I could go on for a long time about how much I've learned from him in a short period of time, but it's just going to help my game. It's going to help this team grow overall.
Good stuff, man. Thanks.
Appreciate it, brother.
Appreciate it.
BJ's always so positive, right? I mean, he just totally gets it. Has embraced the change, and I'm expecting some good things from him under Coach Dawkins, who, if you go back and look at the film, Coach Dawkins had a pretty good was one of those kind of point guards who could score too. You know, I mean, he was a little bit more slight than BJ was, but I can't think of a better guy for BJ to learn under than Coach Dawkins right now.
Oh, I mean, one former point guard coaching another. I mean, you kidding me? I mean, if you're BJ Taylor, I mean, it's as good as it gets. A former player of the year in college basketball, a guy that ended up playing in the NBA for a while. Yeah, I think it's a good fit. And I think if you're Johnny Dawkins, that's got to get you excited that you've got a talented point guard you could work with right away. So I think there's nothing but positives from that for BJ Taylor. And, that'll be fascinating to see what he can pick up from Coach Dawkins and from vice versa.
All right. And speaking of point guards, time now for our special guest on this basketball preview. We were fortunate enough to snag him for about 20 minutes, and he gave us plenty of stuff to talk about here regarding UCF. Here is none other than Mike O'Donnell, former UCF point guard, and also now an analyst with the American Digital Network, and also with ESPN doing some regional games as well with teams around the American Athletic Conference. He was kind enough to give us his insight into Johnny Dawkins coming to UCF, what the players are thinking, and what UCF is going to be facing in terms of competition on the schedule, both out of conference and in conference when conference play begins in the American. So without further ado, here is our conversation with Mike O'Donnell. Joining us now, one of the most beloved basketball players in UCF history, one of the most beloved dudes at UCF anywhere. Played at UCF from 05 to 08, did analysis on the radio broadcast for a while. He currently works for the American Digital Network, and he does analysis as well for ESPN3, covering American Athletic Conference games. And you can listen to him talking with Mark Daniels on the Beat of Sports on 96.9 The Game every Friday at 10:15. They chat what's going on in college basketball. We are so happy to have him on for the first time on this show, Mike O'Donnell. What's up, Mike?
Yeah, man, that is the nicest intro I have ever received in my life. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Well, I'm glad I got it on the second take. All right, so, Mike, we're looking at this team, and hey, it's a brand new era in UCF men's basketball with Johnny Dawkins taking over as the head coach. One game's already in the books, the win over Nicholls State, and a big win it was. But, whenever you have a new head coach, everyone's got to get used to the new system. And there's some levels of unfamiliarity that, every player kind of has to deal with. So I think that there was a lot of talk about how, Johnny Dawkins is here. That means the Duke system is coming to UCF. Because, Johnny being a Duke guy and coached at Stanford and brought that over. So, but is that really the case, or does Johnny kind of have his own thing that he does? And what does that look like? How is UCF basketball different this year from the past?
Well, I think there'll be a lot of Duke philosophies, and it's not because it's just Duke, and it's not because the Duke system is the best system, but every coach takes good things and bad things away from their playing days, from their coaching days, as assistant coaches, as head coaches, and they build their intangibles from what they've received in the past to create their own mantra as a coach. I wouldn't say that those Stanford teams that he coached, Coach Dawkins, when he was at Stanford, were played exactly the same as Duke. And I don't think the way that UCF is going to play in the next couple of years is going to be exactly like Duke. I think it's going to be more from, you're going to see some of the culture of toughness and defense, and the way he's going to recruit maybe emulate that a little bit. But you can't bring over an entire system into a university because people are different. The size of the school is different, conference is different. There's just too many things that don't always add up. But what I think you'll see mainly he'll bring is a sense of ownership in the university that I think has been lacking, to where when you wear those 3 letters across your chest, I mean, it has to mean something. And we hear, I know Jeff and Eric, I mean, you guys have heard it and probably talked about it ad nausea, but, you listen to Coach Dawkins' press conference, and he talks about the great potential, and he's so happy to be here, and it's good location. And we know that as UCF graduates. But, I think now more than ever, due to the incredible facilities that UCF has and the administration really pouring in some dollars into the basketball program, this is a time to where you're going to look at and say, okay, UCF basketball in the next couple of years needs to go to an NCAA tournament. I think it's very safe to say that. I don't think it's foolish or outlandish or me just talking as a fan. I think that's a realistic expectation. I think he's got the pedigree to do so. He's going to have to recruit accordingly. But I think fans are going to be really excited about the style of play and what they're going to see in the next couple of years.
Mike, you've been around him a little bit now. You've been around him since he's been hired. You even were there with the American Conference Media Day. What's it like being around him, talking to him basketball-wise? I mean, here's a guy that people may not realize, some of the young folks, was one of the greatest players in college basketball history. One of the great guards at Duke, was a player of the year. And being around them briefly, not really talking to him, but briefly, there's a presence there. There's a kind of a respect there. I had a chance to talk to him when he was on Tuck and O'Neill when he got hired, and there's a presence there that to me, I think is super valuable, as you talked about, for this program, where I think he's going to open doors for people that maybe didn't know UCF basketball. Now they're going to be interested because, hey, they know who Johnny Dawkins is. Yeah, no, he brings, I think you're right. It's instant credibility. As a player, you can't talk any crap to him because he's done way more than any of the players on the team have. You can't. There's no scenario in which you could possibly disagree with what he's doing because not only has he done it before, he's done it at a high level, he's won at a high level, and then he's competed in the NBA dunk contest, for crying out loud, and he was a good NBA player. And so, he knows he just doesn't know how to win at a high level in college. He also knows what it takes to get to the next level in the NBA, that's the goal for every player who plays college. You want to play in the NBA. It doesn't matter who you are. And he's done it. He knows the right path to do that. And I think, he's going to, but he also, when I've talked to him, I've just been, and it's exciting to hear this. And I go back to this, and it's just, as a former UCF player, it's really important to me. He is all about taking pride into the program of when you're not just putting on a practice uniform to go practice, you're not just putting on a game jersey to play an opponent, you are representing a university that stands for something, and you're starting to see the players take ownership in that. I've always been I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but I've always been I try to preach, if I'm just talking UCF, I want former student athletes to wear their polos, to wear their former warm-up T-shirts and UCF T-shirts. You're walking brands and ambassadors of the university. And I don't think that gets talked about enough from the basketball team. And Dawkins is bringing that kind of level of pride and ownership in the program, which I think is really special.
Yeah, I think that goes into buying in. Now, I think two of the guys from what I've seen who've really bought in, BJ Taylor and Taco Fall. And when I talked to BJ during media day, I couldn't get over how he looks like he's getting ready to compete in the Mr. Universe pageant. He looks like he has really hit the weight room after missing all of last year with the injury. You've played that position at UCF where you're running the point. He's a redshirt sophomore now, even though it's his third year on campus. What's the outlook for BJ heading into this year? What's he going to have to do for this team to be successful?
Well, we didn't really touch on, the lineup, but they're shorthanded. And BJ is going to have to do a lot. That is a cliche understatement of the year. But what BJ is going to have to do is, number one, before anything on the court, he needs to be that vocal leader on the floor. I think I believe Dawkins made A.J. Davis captain. But when you're the point guard, you have to have some type of vocal presence. And as a freshman, he was outstanding. He was an all-freshman conference player. He was great. But, the next step you take in the evolution of your development outside of the court is how do you handle locker room scenarios? How do you handle the huddle? That's such a big deal for point guards. We talk about the game within the game, and I don't think he's quite there yet, but I think he's getting there because his basketball IQ it really is through the roof. He's going to have to score, and he's going to have to, quite honestly, stay out of foul trouble. And that's hard to do. It's hard to play the point guard position, play 36 minutes a game, and not foul. It's just going to happen, especially with the physical defense that Dawkins is playing. I think, he needs to score in double figures every night. The next step in his game is when you're going to see teams, double him in a pick and roll scenario or shade to his side on the wing because he's just so strong and physical and quick that he can overpower a lot of guards. He needs to be able to drive and kick and find the open guy. I noticed it happened a lot for his freshman year. He'd knock a couple buckets in, and then he'd put his head down and freight train himself into the lane. And he can do that in high school. And he got caught amongst the trees a few times last year and had a few costly turnovers. And that's just me being hard on BJ because I just think that he can just be absolutely phenomenal. But when he is able to drive and kick, penetrate inside of the lane area and find open teammates, and to where the defense has to respect that part of his game, I don't know many guards or many defenses that are going to be able to have a game plan to stop him. And when he is able to take that evolution of his game to the next level, he's going to end up being he has all the skill sets to be one of the best players in the history of UCF basketball.
He missed all of last season, Mike. And that really hurt the team last year, clearly. And you mentioned it. He's very important to this team. Is there a kind of a time period here where he has to adjust? Because, he didn't play last year, so he's got to get back to competition on the court. It's one thing to train and practice, but here you're playing in real high competition, and maybe he's got to kind of learn, not relearn himself, but kind of trust himself back that he's fully 100%.
I think there's a little bit of that. Anytime when you're playing and you're worried about getting hurt, you end up getting hurt. So, I mean, you can't worry about that. If it's in his head that he's trying to play tentative, on that foot, he's going to get himself hurt. I haven't seen him do that in practice. I don't think he's favoring it at all. I think he looks great. He basically had a year and a half to get healthy. And, he's, as far as I can tell, he's 100% healthy. There's a little bit of timing issue, Eric, but he, played a lot during the summer when you're talking pickup, and he practiced the whole time this year, played in the exhibition or those secret scrimmages. There might be a little bit early on in the coming year, but that's really every season. He's healthy enough to where I don't think I would even worry about it.
And of course, Taco Fall never got to play with him last year, and now here we go with Taco in his second year. How big of a boost is this for Taco that BJ's on the court with him and can make his game better, right? Because point guards usually, set up the big guys and keep them happy and make them a better player. That's, to me, Mike, and I don't know how you feel about it, that's, to me, the most fascinating thing about this season is seeing BJ and Taco playing together and what the capabilities are of those two playing together.
Yeah, if they use each other correctly. And I think in the first game they did a pretty good job. You could have a great point guard and a great center, but if they don't play off each other, you wouldn't even know they existed. Taco will be involved in some pick and rolls. Where Taco is going to be able to bail out BJ is when he puts his head down and he turns into that freight train that I talked about earlier. When he's able to just toss it up and lob it up literally anywhere around the rim, and Taco can just grab it and slam it like he does, that is such a relief as a point guard because it gives you an automatic bailout move. And anytime when you drive amongst the trees as a point guard and you have a bailout move, that's great. And if your bailout move happens to be tossing the ball up to a 7'6" center who catches everything, that's beautiful, man. I'd be foaming at the mouth if I was BJ Taylor.
Taking a look at the other guys that are in the lineup, Matt Williams had a very good game shooting from outside in the opener, 6 of 11 from three-point range. And then Tank Ifani, didn't have a very good shooting day, but did record 9 rebounds. A.J. Davis didn't play, but we expect to see him in there. Nick Banyard filled in for him and scored in double figures. Actually had a double-double of his own, 10 and 12. So it looks to me, Mike, like they have the makings of a pretty good looking starting 5 in terms of talent and in terms of experience. What do you think about this group?
It's a really good starting 5. Again, there's just no depth. Literally, he might be only able to play 7-8 guys. I mean, you've got a couple walk-ons that'll be playing, in Coach Lang's son and George, but they're going to have to find minutes in other areas. Tank has a lot of skill. I think he's got a great shot. I'd love for him to be more aggressive. I think the more aggressive he is towards the rim, as opposed of he took some shots last year, fade away 19-footers that I'm looking at him and I'm saying, you got to get that. Right? You got to get that Kobe out of your system, man. You just got to let it go. But he's a great 3-point shooter. He really is, and he's a good enough athlete to get to the rim. I'd like to see him attack more. A.J. Davis will be back in 3 weeks. He might be the best all-around player in conference. His skill set is incredible. He's your classic point forward, really difficult mismatch for opposing teams. And when he's back in the starting lineup, it totally changes everything. Matt Williams is one of my just favorite people that's ever put on the UCF jersey before. He's an incredible kid, hard worker, tough, loves playing for the Knights. And, he's a knockdown 3-point shooter. You saw it in the opening game. He hit 6 threes. He's a big-time shooter. If you take on the perimeter, the pair of B.J. Taylor, Matt Williams, and A.J. Davis, and then you complement that with Taco Fall, that's as good of a group of 4 as you're going to find in the American, and I believe that it's going to take a little bit of time to gel, but I think it's a strong, very talented group, and I actually think you'll see Chad Brown get a lot of minutes as the season progresses. I know Coach Dawkins really likes Chad. It calls him an everyday guy. He might have nicks and bruises and sprains and all that stuff, but he shows up to practice every day and never sits out. He just loves to play. So I think he's very, very raw offensively, but he's incredibly gifted athletically. And I think you'll see Chad Brown get a lot of minutes off the bench.
Is he one of the keys to the season for this team? You mentioned the lack of depth on this team for a variety of reasons. We've talked about BJ being a big factor, but a guy like Chad Brown who may have to give energy off the bench, who may have to play multiple positions inside depending on matchups, is a guy like that a key guy to watch, but maybe the casual fan doesn't know about, but could be a big factor for this team to have success?
I think so. I don't know if he is exactly a key to this success, but it's just a part of it. It's part of that flow, Eric, of, Chad has to be productive off the bench, regardless of if someone's in foul trouble or not. It can't be, it can't be the only time Chad comes in is when Taco's in foul trouble. Coach Dawkins has to have enough faith in him to put Chad in to complement Taco, as opposed to putting him in for because he has to, because he just has literally no other choice. And I think in itself that scheme, that frame of thought is a big key for this year.
We'll go ahead and finish up here, Mike, with a couple things. You've got, obviously you're following the American this year. We're going to see you on TV a lot on ESPN3. You're keeping track of a bunch of teams on the around the conference in the preseason. Well, I call it the preseason, but the non-conference season before we get right before New Year's Day. I was looking at the schedule, and things. There are a couple of modest challenges on there. UMass, Penn, for example, Miami of Ohio. Before UCF gets to conference play, what would be the optimal outlook for UCF in the non-conference schedule? And then when we get to conference, who are the teams that we need to keep a very close eye on?
Well, if you can get to 8 to 10 wins before you hit conference, I think that's really good. You mentioned some of those teams. I mean, here are the teams they have to take care of. They need to beat Seattle, Stetson. You're at UMass. It's hard to win at UMass. It really is. Yep. But if you could steal a win there, that'd be great. Penn at home. Penn is a little down this year, but they're a really solid Patriot League team. Ivy League team. And you're at George Washington. Really, really hard place to play. I mean, that George Washington team last year was outstanding when they beat the Knights in Orlando. And then you got to take care of Miami, Ohio, and Bethune-Cookman. It's hard, that College of Charleston. The Charleston Classic coming up here in a few days is going to be a big test, because they could, depending on how they do, they could, they're going to play Mississippi State, but then they could play Boise State. They could even play Villanova or Wake Forest. So you have opportunities to steal a couple games early that help your RPI, help your strength of schedule. And that's big because you're playing to get in some type of postseason. With the talent in this team, if you can get to 10 wins before conference play, the opportunity to play in the NIT is not a far-fetched idea, and I think that's what you would have to work for.
Look at the conference, Mike. What's your kind of thoughts? I know you were up there at Media Day covering it for the American Digital Network. What stands out to you as far as this conference, which, certainly it's got some intriguing storylines going into the season and some interesting plot lines going in?
Well, so far at the beginning of the year, some of the teams we thought were going to be really good have been playing terrible, and some of the bottom level teams have looked really good. For example, USF is much better. When they get their point guard Jamal McMurray back from suspension on December 3rd, I believe is when he comes back, they're going to be very good. They're very athletic. Their backcourt's very good. Tulane is much improved. You have Coach Dunleavy, who's taken over that program, and I called their game last night. And I tell you, that does not look like your normal Tulane, kind of slow-paced team. I mean, they're sprinting in transition, throwing alley-oops, running NBA-style offense. They were fun to watch. UConn just went 0-2 at home, and they lost to North. I believe it was Northeastern, and Wagner. They lost their opener to Wagner, and I don't know what is going on with the Huskies, but they have looked bad in the first two games. East Carolina is improved. Temple lost a game the other night that they should have lost. Houston will be very good. SMU will be very good again. And I think you'll see but I'm telling you right now, Cincinnati, they are built for the Sweet 16. They have one of the best point guards in the country in Troy Copain. Their defense is just absolutely ridiculous. It's impossible to score against them, and they added some offensive firepower in a transfer from NC State, Kyle Washington, who is basically averaged a double-double at NC State in the ACC. So I think Cincinnati is poised for a Sweet 16 run. They're built for the tournament. I think this could be the year Cincinnati goes on a run.
What do you think about the Memphis now with Tubby Smith as the head coach, too? After Josh Pastner for so many years there, you've played in that against Memphis program before in the past. You've been to that building at Memphis, a great fan base. And I think the conference is kind of hoping that Memphis kind of returns to being that team, a Sweet 16 like you talk about with Cincinnati and Connecticut's of the world there in the conference. We saw them last year in Orlando make the run to the championship game before losing to Connecticut, and then Josh Pastner decides to go to Georgia Tech, and now Tubby Smith comes over from Texas Tech.
Yeah, well, Tubby is he's a Hall of Fame coach, period. If he takes Memphis to an NCAA tournament in the next couple of years, that'll be 6 different teams he's taken to the NCAA tournament. That's unheard of. He just can flat-out coach. I think they'll love him in Memphis. I think he fits that city really well. He'll be able to recruit. He's the perfect scenario right now to kind of bring some tough and grittiness to that city and that program. The facilities are there. The support is there. There's plenty of administrative support and dollars into the program. But they just have to recruit according to Tubby's system. It won't be like the old Calipari teams with the dribble drive offense and pressing, but it will be a physical style of basketball. I mean, this is a guy who won a national championship. I mean, he just can flat out coach, and I think he'll be able to turn that Memphis program around. And that's a program at his age that you could see him retiring at Memphis and, ending his career on a high note. I mean, he'll be there. He could be there for another 6 to 8 years, and I think he'll be just fine. And I think they're really going to like him up there. And he elevates the American Conference brand. There's no question.
Well, we got a lot of really tough coaches in this league, and a lot of really good, really tough players too. And this should be a really interesting. It's almost like we're getting ready for this gigantic science experiment this year with UCF basketball playing not just their non-conference, but in the American. Mike O'Donnell, thank you so much. Hey, where can people follow you throughout the year, Mike?
On Twitter, you've got MOD, the number 4, and then the word 3. That's MOD for 3 on Twitter, and I'll be traveling all over the place up until Christmas here, doing games.
All right, and you'll be on ESPN 3 here and there, I understand, with the American Digital Network as well. And
yes, sir.
It's always fun to see. And you're also going to be on the Beat of Sports every Friday at around 10:15. Is that right?
That's right. Yep, 10:15 every Friday. Our Step Back 3 segment. It's an all hoop segment for the Beat of Sports.
All right, Mike O'Donnell, thank you so much, and I hope we can check in with you one more time right before conference play. What do you say?
Yeah, would love that. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, Mike. We'll talk to you again soon.
All righty.
And thanks again to Mike, who's been such a good friend of ours since even when, he came here right when we were just getting ready to graduate, right? And remember how when he came over from NC State and we're like, ooh, this guy from NC State, he can shoot. And he became one of the great point guards and great shooters in UCF history and has stayed close to the program. And we owe Mike tremendous thanks. I'm hoping we can get him back on here again some point soon, maybe here and there throughout the year.
Yeah, he's fantastic to talk to, down-to-earth guy. Had a heck of a good career at UCF. I'll never forget the three-pointer he made in 2007 in a marquee game against a good Houston team in a battle for second place to Memphis in the Conference USA when the old, now the venue, used to be the old UCF Arena, was rocking. Clutch player, has done it all at UCF, was a color analyst for Mark Daniels for a little while, and then moved into director of operations under the coaching staffs under Donnie Jones and stuff like that. He's done it all. Mm-hmm. But, knowing him, he's always had that, he's always wanted to do the broadcasting. He did Bright House Sports Network for a while when, still does. I mean, he does Bright House, or high school games as well. We forgot to mention that, but he also did the Bright House Sports Network games when UCF games were on there. So yeah, I think that's his passion. It's obvious, and he's fantastic at it. He has a gift for it. So I'm excited that he's in the broadcasting deal, doing ESPN 3, doing the Bright House thing. And what's interesting, he's going to be a guy that I think should be considered for the UCF Hall of Fame here in the future when you consider the contributions that he has done for basketball on and off the court, Jeff. And you worked at UCF, so you know a little bit more about the Hall of Fame and how that works behind the scenes and stuff. When you put the whole, and correct me if I'm wrong, they have various of categories for people to get into the Hall of Fame. It's obviously your athletic achievement, but there's also contributions that you've done to the program, the respective teams, and stuff like that. And I think Michael O'Donnell checks the boxes, don't you? Maybe down the road, maybe to get an invite into the Hall of Fame, in my opinion.
He gets my vote. There's no question about it because he, like you mentioned, on the court, off the court. Dude just bleeds black and gold, just like he. I always thought, he was, if any of us, broadcasting nerds could have played, we would have been, we would have totally been in Mike O'Donnell's corner the entire time because he just, a guy who eats, sleeps, and breathes the game too, and I'm glad we got the chance to get his insight because it's so valuable. So, All right, Eric, let me give you, in lieu of making predictions, let me just give you this. What are UCF's percentage chances, in your opinion, that they, A, win 20 games, and B, make a postseason tournament?
I think because of the lack of depth, I don't think it's super high. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, if Johnny Dawkins were able to pull that off, I mean, that's National Coach of the Year material, in my opinion.
You're talking about 20 wins?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I mean, this conference is tough. I mean,
the coaches in this conference, man, now. Unbelievable. Mike Dunleavy at Tulane, for crying out loud now. Kelvin Sampson.
Mike Calvin's done already a great job turning around Houston. Mike Dunleavy, I know Mike O'Donnell, we just heard him. He's very high on Tulane. You got Tubby Smith at Memphis. It's tough. I just don't know, with the lack of depth. I think that catches up with you in the conference. So to me, I don't see 20 wins. I could see, maybe I think a 500 type season overall. But I hope I'm wrong. If they want to improve on that, then they could certainly get in conversation for postseason. It's tough. It's
so hard. Yeah.
The lack of depth is a concern, and will they have enough firepower when they face, the Cincinnatis of the world? That's going to be very difficult. And I think, when you're lacking depth, that means you almost have to be lucky and not get any serious injuries during the year. And that's, so I just think, to me, I don't even judge this season. I think this year is more of a free year, free pass. Just go have some fun, watch some basketball. You hope for some individual guys to kind of, play well and develop for next year when you have all those guys that are, sitting out this year. They're either transferring or being recruited by Coach Dawkins. I think you'll have a better barometer, and I think the expectations will be more realistic next year. I think this is a transitional year, and I just think you got to be realistic with it, and you just go a game at a time and see what happens. But to me, the impact, I think, will be more off the court than on the court. I don't know. I think Coach Dawkins will bring interest to the UCF basketball program that maybe has been lacking a little bit by his name recognition, and his presence. And I think the players will feed off of that too. And I don't think lack of effort will be an issue this year. I don't think you'll question that, but I just think, to me, that you got to give him a year or two to build up that roster. And I think at that point, then we can start talking, I think, postseason.
Postseason, well, I still don't think like something like the CBI might be out of reach, especially if they get to about 16, 17 wins. Maybe you steal a few in conference. I don't know. We mentioned, Mike mentioned the struggles that UConn has gotten off to under Kevin Ollie. Some of the other, I'm still in awe of these coaches. Fran Dunphy, obviously at Temple, who's been a fantastic coach over there and has been there since he took over for John Chaney. We talked about Tubby Smith. We talked about Kelvin Sampson. Frank Haith at Tulsa. And, of course, Mike Dunleavy Sr. at Temple. Can't forget about Mike Cronin up at Cincinnati, and then Johnny Dawkins throws his hat in the ring. So this is going to be a tough league. Danny White was talking last week about Power 6. I think it's going to be pretty hard to say that UCF that the American's not a Power 6 league in terms of basketball, considering the coaching talent in this league. So I'm hoping we get to maybe a CBI here and there. I'm thinking it might be 50-50 on that. 20 wins, I'm thinking maybe less than 10% chance. But like we said, so you're saying there's a chance. I don't know. You never know. It might get hot. Guys might figure it out real quick. Some other teams might fall by the wayside. And so, at least it's a possibility. But I know one thing. You're absolutely right, though, Eric. This should be a fun team to watch this year. And hopefully we'll get a glimmer of hope. We'll get some glimmers of hope and some little hints of things to come, don't you think?
Yeah, hopefully. That's the key there. So that's the hope.
All right, so that'll do it for our men's basketball special preview episode. Once again, you can follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter, as well as on Facebook. Subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud. And you can find Eric Lopez at Eric Lopez Elo on Twitter. You can follow me at Jeff_Sharon. Thanks again, Eric.
Always a pleasure, Jeff.
All right, and that'll do it for this special edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We will catch you again next week.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.